Want to launch and grow your podcast in 2019 and beyond? Hello there, I'm Marc Guberti, and I'm going to be sharing with you the tactics I used in this video to launch breakthrough success, get it to the point where it's getting 60,000 listeners per episode because it's now a radio show. I'm going to talk about how I've been able to brand the show, how I've been able to create products around it, from this cap to upcoming book to even playing cards. So there's definitely a lot to cover. But I'm not a guy who came out with a podcast in 2016 and is teaching you in 2019 and beyond how to launch a podcast. I'm a guy who came out with a podcast in 2016, but another podcast in 2019, Profitable Public Speaking, which I launched very recently. So you will get from someone who launched a podcast fresh in 2019. So the first place we start is choosing a topic for our podcast, because it's hard to launch a podcast if we don't know the topic. So one of the questions that you need to ask yourself is, are you okay with talking about the same topic for 10 years or 20 years or even more into the future? And I bring this up because one of the things people think about doing is they pick some kind of fad and or trend and they just ride on it now, but can they continue talking about it for the long term? For instance, you have something like Bitcoin, which I'm not bashing Bitcoin here, but people loved it when it was getting these crazy returns. And then the moment it started its sharp decline, people didn't cover it as much, or people didn't follow it as much. Now, it can be on the rise again. I have no idea what's going to happen with Bitcoin, but the idea is that you don't want to ride on some kind of a high and then not being able to cover it if the fad loses momentum or something like that, or it's not getting as much media coverage, because that was certainly the case with Bitcoin. Like, people loved it. Like, there's still some question about it, but from like a make money standpoint, people loved it when it was getting these high returns. And then when it was down, it was certainly getting less coverage because it wasn't getting these crazy returns during that stretch of time. So you want to make sure you're picking something you can talk about for 10 years, 20 years, or even deeper into the future. So pick something that you really enjoy talking about, but also something that you see that there's demand for the topic. Like, I enjoy talking about content marketing, helping people win a business in life. These are areas that they have demand, and I enjoy talking about them. So it was a perfect mix. So you want to, before you confirm a podcast topic, make sure there is some demand. There are some people who they do local podcasts where it may not get a lot of international reach, but it gets a really strong reach within your community if you share it with that community. So there's a lot of different topics that you can turn into businesses. It's just a matter of just doing a basic search on Stitcher or the podcast app on an iPhone or something like that. Just find if there is demand, see if there are other podcasts around the similar topics or the same topic, and then you have an idea that this is something that listeners are already tuning into, and it's something you could potentially build a business around. So once you figure out what topic you want your podcast to be on, the next step is to just get the technology set up. Now, we're going to be really basic here because there are other videos that recommend like a billion different options to use for your mic. I'll just share with you my current setup, which has worked for me very well. I've been doing this since 2016 with breakthrough success. Even with Profitable Public Speaking, pretty much the same setup. So what we have here, that is a Blue Yeti microphone. This is a noise popper, this thing right here. So basically, it just reduces the amount of background noise that can potentially happen. And it even cuts down. So like, if background noise does get into the audio, which it depends on your setup. Like, if you're working in a noisy area, you're definitely gonna get more background noise. If you're working in a silent area, not as much background noise, but even something like typing or writing down a note can sometimes be in that background noise. This does a great job at reducing it. Get the Yeti, that is what I use. Also this pop filter thing. What I use to record videos, you could do videos. Yeah, I'm mentioning videos here because I usually turn my podcast episodes into YouTube videos because it gets more engagement. It's one of those like why not things, because now all of a sudden you're also not just creating content for your podcast, but you're also checking that box for YouTube. If you don't want to do video, you can definitely do audio. I use Skype. I use that a lot when I wanted to do just audio, because I did a lot of audio exclusive episodes. And the Ecan call recorder, that's Skype to record. And for video, I prefer to use Zoom, because Zoom allows you to get better video quality overall, while Skype is a less expensive option if you just want to do audio. Now, if you are someone who is watching this video right now and you want to get on YouTube, like have that kind of a presence, but you don't want to do video, first I'd recommend do video, because it's going to help a lot. But if you want to get your podcast episodes on YouTube, this also applies to old episodes where maybe you're hearing about doing video podcasts for the first time. One thing you can do is use a tool that I love called Repurposed IO. They pretty much allow you to take any of your podcast episodes, turn it into a video. You get a really nice static image of your show, and you get to see the sounds move in real time. Like, you know how those things like on radio or something like that, like a sound goes up like this and has like a different cadence to it depending on how loudly someone is speaking. They do all of that for you. They're actually really affordable too, just $12 per month, and you get all of your old episodes. You turn all of those into videos you put on YouTube, and all the future ones are actually automated. So the great thing about that one is you don't have to manually go onto YouTube, manually create that static image, manually upload, and manually description, publish, all that stuff, because Repurpose takes care of all that for you. Again, that link will be in the description of this video for anyone who is interested. So we have that down. We have the technology, because that's really important. I feel like when I was first starting, like I would have started podcasting earlier if I knew all this stuff, because I had tried 2 other times before and it just didn't work out because I didn't know stuff. So that's the technology you need. You may evolve, like you may go for like their like $400, $500 microphones, which I don't feel are necessary for a lot of people, especially when you're just starting out. So yeah, Blue Yeti, the one I just mentioned, $100. It's the highest quality mic you can get at that kind of a price point. So there's my recommendation for the technology. Now we'll talk about episode structure. And we are getting soon to the part where launching your podcast, you're using Libsyn. How do we get it in iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher? We're going to get into that. But I just want to make this a complete video for anyone who is like, oh, I should really start a podcast. I have no idea what I'm doing though. So this is that video for all those people. And if you just want to get to the tech part, we have that timestamp in the description. So with the episodes, you want to think about structure. And we'll start with foundational stuff, then we'll get a little deeper into this. The main thing you want to decide, the big decision, is do you interview people or do you do solos? And solos, they're easier to create. You just get on the computer, or even do something simple like record yourself on the iPhone. You see this is branded too. You record yourself on your phone or whatever, and you just start talking. The audio, like one of the things, audio doesn't have to be perfect, but it does have to be respectable. That more applies to the iPhone. Like when I'm on the computer, like I have the whole setup. I have the blue mic, I have the headphones as well. So definitely if you are in a position to get really good audio, use that. But you can definitely just record yourself on your smartphone when you're away from your computer. There's a power tip for you. Use your smartphone to do video and record yourself in those small pockets of time. Anyway, going back to the style of your show, interview or solo. Solos, as we mentioned, are good for some of the, like, you could create them on your own schedule, but interviews are really how you grow as a podcaster, because it's really different. For Breakthrough Success, for instance, at this time, we are at a solid 360 something episodes. And that's been 360 episodes where I say to a guest, thank you for being on the show. Here is the link to share our interview. I'd also appreciate if you leave a review for the show. So this is actually how not only do you get a lot of reviews this way, like the majority of podcasts, the way they get their reviews is they just reach out to guests afterwards. They say, hey, do you want to I greatly appreciate if you leave a review for my show. That's actually how a lot of podcasters get their reviews. And another big thing about that is that you're having all these different people promote the podcast episode, while if you just do it to yourself, it's like, hey, me, our episode is live. We better start promoting this thing, versus having over 360 people promote your podcast for you. And that doesn't include all the fans that you attract for your show. That doesn't include the people in their own audiences decide to retweet their tweet or share their Facebook post or just continue to spread the word about your show. So interviewing people is really, really great for expanding the reach for your show. So this is just some of the foundational stuff you have to think about when you are launching your show. So just some really quick advice on interviewing people for your show. We'll talk about that a little bit before getting to the next part, which is about scheduling. So when you interview people, the best thing, when I first started, I always came in with more questions than I needed, because I didn't want to have to think of a new question. I just wanted to have more than what I needed. I wanted to be over prepared, just so I wouldn't come with a blank or anything like that. So in the beginning, it is good to come up with a bunch of questions, but also know that you will most likely not cover all of them, and you should never ask them in the order that you write them. Because one of the biggest issues with over preparing for a podcast interview is sounding robotic, where it's just question 1, say what you want to say. I'm moving to question 2 as soon as you're done. I'm moving to question 3 as soon as you're done, with no commentary on what you just said. So that is one of the issues with over preparing. It is good when you're beginning just to have that sense of confidence. So if you do have more questions than you need, that's definitely good when you're starting. As you get better at it though, my advice is to just have some bullet points on what you want to discuss instead of actual questions, because then it allows for a conversation to develop. Because sometimes what will happen is a guest will say something really interesting, and the only way to really spot it is if you're listening and not thinking about the next question you have to ask. So this is actually a great way to do a better job of listening as the podcast host. You would think that a podcast host has to listen to everything and is listening to everything the guest is saying, but retention. I mean, it honestly, like, sometimes it's not the case. And the way that you do a better job at listening is if you're thinking, okay, this is a great conversation, let me ask the next question in a way that follows up with the conversation, instead of what is there in front of me. What's question number 3? Because I just asked question number 2. So those are just some thoughts on the interviewing. The one thing I do recommend preparing for a lot though is the intro. And when you intro the guest, that's the most important. Because if you start with a bad intro, no one's gonna listen to that episode. But if you start with a intro that really grabs people's attention and really does a great job of introducing the guest, that's gonna be really good. So for both my podcast, Breakthrough Success and Profitable Public Speaking, which I launched in 2019, I basically say, welcome to the name of the show. I'm your host, Marc Guberti, some credentials about me, CEO and founder of the Content Marketing Plaza, bringing you 3 new episodes each week, where I and top experts talk about how to grow your business, something like that. I actually got most of that right. I don't have that scripted for me right now, but the idea is that you introduce the show, you introduce yourself, you give an expectation, like 3 episodes per week. So if someone is coming on the show for the first time, they know 3 episodes per week. That is the expectation that you create in that intro right away. And then you talk about what they're going to get from the show. And then you talk about, after all that's done, that one part that I gave you, you then just briefly talk about the topic. So if it's about goal setting, I'll be like, goal setting is really important. It's what allows people to grow their businesses. But how can we get better at it? So that question, that kind of leads into what the episode's going to be about. Then you intro the guest. So you say, today's guest is all these different things. And you only say the name of the guest at the very end. A lot of people, they just say the name of the guest like up front. You want to have some kind of suspense and lead in. Now, I know some people, they'll just look at the title and they'll be like, oh, so-and-so's on the show. But it makes for a better intro if you say today's guest and then you lead deeper into it. And then you finally introduce the name of the guest. at the end of that long intro, and then you get into the questions that you have. Like coming up with questions, you're just going to get better at that as you go. And if you listen to podcasts, like you'll get an idea of like some good questions to ask. You definitely change along the way. I've asked some questions for like more than 200 episodes of Breakthrough Success that I just don't ask anymore, just because I feel like I could provide more value by asking a different question. So that's my advice on the interviewing style. Now we're going to talk about having a set schedule in place, because the way that your listeners come back is if they know that you come out with episodes at a certain time and date. It's like your favorite TV show. Now, I know that maybe you don't have a favorite TV show. It might be a favorite podcast. You have a favorite something, though, that comes on at least once a week at a certain time. And your podcast needs to be similar. You need to have a set, like it comes on these days or days each week at a certain time. And that's going to condition your listeners to checking into your episodes. Now, a great thing about Libsyn, which again, Breakthrough, that coupon code gives you this month free and the following month free, they let you do scheduling. Now, honestly, this is something a lot of the options give you. That's like a very basic thing, the ability to schedule your podcast. But there are some, believe it or not, that they do not let you schedule your episodes, which you need to have that feature for the consistency and conditioning your audience to come back each time. Unless you're there every single, in my case, Monday, Wednesday, or Friday at 9 a.m. to click that button for Breakthrough Success, the publish button, or for Profitable Public Speaking, if you're there every Tuesday and Thursday at 9 a.m. Eastern, clicking that button, I mean, that's something we can't do. So that's why we schedule our episodes in advance. And on that note of scheduling, it is good to have a lot of content scheduled in advance. So for my podcast, Profitable Public Speaking, which I launched recently, I made sure I had at least 2 months of spare content before I launched. Now, I remember for Breakthrough Success, I only had about a month, maybe a month and a half of content, but it's really not that many episodes that you need, because if you start off as a weekly podcast, which is pretty much the standard, you can stretch more later, but if you have a weekly podcast, then you just need, it's always good to come out with 3 episodes at least, because the more episodes you come out with, the more downloads your show is able to get. One person can be 3 downloads, and that helps with ranking on all these different places. But let's say, including those 3 episodes, you would just have to interview 11 people, and then you're ahead for 2 months. Or you would just have to interview 7 people and have those episodes ready, and you're ahead by a whole month. And that is a really big advantage, because now you're not creating the content feeling stressed, thinking about, I gotta edit this thing, I gotta have all this stuff done by some day, like this week, because that's really stressful. I had to do that with my radio show when I was first starting, because I didn't have as much go-ahead content. But it is good to interview more people leading up to the show, just so you have that leeway. So if you have to take 2 weeks off because you're on a vacation, you don't have to stress. You can spend time with your family. You don't have to be bunkered down doing the podcast when you can be vacationing or whatever it is you want to be doing, because podcasting is just one area of your business and just one area of your life. So it is good to have that schedule set in advance. And then it just makes it easier for you to be consistent and always in front of your listeners at that specific time frame and specific day that they expect you. All right, at this point, we are just one essential thing away from going into Libsyn, deep into the dashboard, talking about that, getting you on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher. And the one thing left to do is get the artwork for your podcast, because you need the right artwork in order to get a lot of attention for your show, create that eye-popping effect, have a really great brand. So one of the things people think is that it costs a lot of money to get the art. That's just false. Like, people think they have to spend hundreds of dollars. Some people will tell you you have to spend hundreds of dollars, but that's not true at all. So if you look back here, I've got 3 of my books. I have Breakthrough Success, Profitable Public Speaking. That logo will be back there someday. But I bring all these up because people have told me, wow, I mean, like, how much did you spend? And people think that it's $100 per book cover, or even like $100 for Breakthrough Success logo. But in reality, all of those logos, whether it's a book cover I do, or the Breakthrough Success or Profitable Public Speaking, all of that is through Fiverr. So what that means is I'm literally paying just $5 for each of those. And people literally think that it's at least $100 that I'm spending. So that's the great thing about podcasting and just having a creative mind. If you approach it the right way, you can get the same results for a lot less money. So if you are scrappy with your resources, it's easier for you to get a higher quality result than it is if you just throw money at something, because sometimes throwing money at something, that's not the best play. Because then it's just easier to make mistakes if you throw that money the wrong way. So you definitely, when you start, like for instance, like we're going back to microphones, this Yeti $99 microphone, maybe around 100 or maybe slightly higher now. Pretty sure it's just around $100 though. I mean, I don't get why people feel like they have to start with like a $500 microphone. Will it sound better than a Blue Yeti? Yes. But do you need a microphone to sound that good for a podcast interview where the person who's listening is probably going to be exercising or driving, or because a lot of people multitask when they listen to podcast episodes. They're not going to care if you have the $100 microphone or the $500 microphone. They're just going to care if it sounds good and you get the value across. Understand your listener. That's what they care about. And almost everyone who listens to a podcast is multitasking to some degree, whether it's walking, driving, exercising, or something else like that. So, I mean, again, like it's just $5 for a podcast logo. And that's pretty much it. There are some people on Fiverr who maybe they charge $10, but you don't really need more than $10 to get your own podcast logo. If you are a DIYer, you can use Canva. Canva is a great resource. You can choose the size of your image along the line. You want to make it a square image. So something like 1400 by 1400, and that's gonna give you the canvas, that white square where you can just drop a bunch of images in, create the podcast a logo that you want, and then you put that into Libsyn, which we'll show you pretty soon. But for stuff like this, like it's $5 to get someone else to do it for you, create a really good cover art like that. I feel like it is worth putting the $5 into your business, because I feel like if someone's worried about a $5 investment in your own business, you got to put money down to get results. You can't just go into a business and expect to put absolutely no money down, because a lot of these options, like all these options like Libsyn and all the other ones, they cost money. It's not that much money. But if you're afraid of putting down $5, I mean, on any of those books, I don't know if I create a cover as good as that. I mean, these covers are really good, and it would have to take me a lot of time to get pictures and think of the ideas. And would you rather spend an hour, or even if it's just 30 minutes, creating a cover for your podcast, or would you rather hire someone? Because if it takes you 30 minutes to create a podcast cover art that you could just pay someone else to do, you're saying that your time is worth $10 per hour in that case. And I feel like a lot of us, we are worth more than $10 per hour. And we can just use that time instead to have the extra episode done, to work on the book or the training course that we're going to promote in the podcast. So there's certainly a lot better things you can do with your time than create the art yourself, when you just have people on Fiverr who will do it for you for as little as $5 for your artwork. So that is all the foundational stuff you need for preparing a podcast. If you feel like we could go more in ground on this, just like leave comments, and I'll elaborate on certain things if you feel like we didn't touch on. But now we're going to touch on the technology. So Libsyn, getting on iTunes, getting on Stitcher, getting on Spotify. How do we launch your podcast in 2019 so it is on all of these places, and then promote it? We're going to talk a little bit about that too. So now that we have all the foundational stuff covered, we're going to go into the Libsyn dashboard. If you do want to join us, use that coupon code BREAKTHROUGH and you'll get this month and the next month free. But this is what it looks like. We're going to talk a little bit about it, how to launch your podcast here, get it on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher. So basically you get to see all of your stats. So right now we are just a little under 50,000 all-time downloads for the podcast. The radio stats are not here because that's a different setup. But I'm actually going to go into my newer show, Profitable Public Speaking. And you can see here, like, this is a very new show. Like, we're not launching this, we're not creating this video with, like 3 years of podcasting experience. And it's been a really long time since I launched the show. Like, this is as new looks like. We haven't even hit the 100th download yet. So here we are in the Libsyn dashboard. So there are a few different things you need to know about so you have the best experience with your podcast. The first thing we will cover is the expenses. So honestly, as you can see, let me just zoom this. It's not that much. I mean, you could get started for as little as $5 per month. And I recommend if you really don't have much content to upload, I would actually up it to $7 per month, because those stats are really important as you get to see, like how many downloads you get. And that number is important because it shows you what are your good days, what are your bad days, which of your episodes did really well, which of your episodes did not do as well. What I like to do for my podcast, though, is I like to hover around the $15 to $20 per month mark. And the only real difference between these two, in this one, you get just a few more stats that can be helpful. I use this one for breakthrough success, but for profitable public speaking, since it's still relatively new and I don't upload a ton of episodes, I just do 2 a week. File size is not much. So this is the option that I use, $15 per month. You get a lot of the essentials with that option. So the important thing about all these options is the storage space they give you. And this option, the 250 megabytes, that is more than enough for most people. Because as you can see, some of my files, like this interview I did with Matt and Bree, it's not even 10 megabytes. So this is more than enough for a lot of people. So that's basically the inner workings of how companies like Libsyn, how much they charge per month and storage space. So it's really not that expensive to have a podcast. Right now, this is pretty much all of the main expenses. You have the $5 for creating Fiverr cover art. You have Skype, which is really inexpensive. Zoom, which is closer to, I believe, $15 a month. So still really affordable. So the worst we're talking about here is maybe $30 or $40 each month for hosting a podcast. If you do decide to use Repurposed IO, that's also another $12 a month as well, but you also get your content on YouTube. So again, podcasting, I love the fact that you get to interview a bunch of people, learn a bunch of different things, and it's all very affordable. Now, what we're going to talk about now is creating a show, because right now we've been talking about, change your show, and you've seen my different options. But if you gotta actually create a show, I'm not gonna actually do this because I don't have a new show idea right now, but basically you would type in your show name, you would decide how you wanna pay, that's totally up to you. This whole part's up to you. And then you would pick your plan. I recommend, if you're just starting out and you have interviews, I would do the 15 a month. But the 7 a month, if you really don't have that much megabytes, that could be a good option as well. So it's really pretty affordable, terms of service, you hit agree, you click create show. And basically, once you do all those steps and you pay and you do all that fun stuff, you would get into something like this. You would have your own dashboard. It would show these stats. If you pick anything $7 a month or higher, you get your storage usage, which is pretty good to know, and you have all these different options. Just a quick thing, for storage, if you break past that limit, you can pay Libsyn $5 to archive one episode to open up more space. My recommendation is just to, if you ever run out of storage space, just upgrade your plan just for that month and then downgrade after. That's usually what I do if I run out of storage space for one of my shows. So now we have this dashboard. What exactly do we do with it to grow our podcast and to get it on all these different places like, iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, stuff I've been talking about for a while. And before we do that, you just want to put episodes up. So add a new episode, add your media file. I like to upload from the hard drive because then you get all of your different file options. So you hit that, you upload, you get to see how many megabytes it is. Then you hit details, you put your title, you put all the descriptions. I usually just have that set as general, and I will put tags and keywords here, like my name, the name of the guest, the topic, and stuff like that. And it does have this note here saying that, iTunes no longer recognizes tags, keywords, all that stuff. So it is good to put it in the episode title and description too. That's just good SEO practice. But tags and keywords, that's like it. iTunes is the big player. People love talking about iTunes and ranking there. But you have Stitcher, you have Spotify, and those are two places where keywords are a factor. So that's why I do put the keywords there. After that, you have artwork, stuff like that. I don't really go into the artwork, other people do. Scheduling, this is where we go into how to schedule a new episode. Very important. There are different options. Make sure you pick this one, because one time I set the expiration date instead of the release date. So what happened is the episode came out super early and then it disappeared when it was actually supposed to come out. So that was a bit of a mess for me. Expiration date can be useful for some people depending on your overall strategy, but when you are choosing dates on this calendar, make sure you are picking from the release date tab. Now the advanced, I never go in here, honestly. I mean, like rating, I literally never touch that. They give you stuff like when you're starting your show, like in the show settings, like pick your rating, like whether you want it to be clean or like for each episode, so you don't have to do it each time. So this is what it looks like inside of the show settings. Put the title of your show, description. I'm going to make this a longer description eventually. It's good to make your descriptions long and fill them with keywords. I usually don't do that though. When I'm just starting a show, I just go for a minimal viable product for my shows. Website address, this is going to be really important. So we're just going to copy that right now, because this is what you need to get into iTunes. So just a bunch of extra stuff here. This is also where you upload your artwork. So as you can see, 1400 by 1400 pixels. If you are creating on Canva, make sure you have that picture size. If you're hiring someone, usually a lot of people on Fiverr, they know about the 1400 by 1400. You just want to check to make sure by uploading into Libsyn, but you should be fine if you hire from Fiverr. Content categories, you can put more here. I just like to have the general, custom domains, episode default. So you want to say it's clean or explicit depending on what you do, but it's good to set these in advance because they help a little bit with iTunes. Color swatches, I don't do that. Close show, we're definitely not going to press that in this episode or ever. So that's the settings. Now, I understand like I'm kind of touring you through Libsyn right now, but now we're going to get into the good stuff. Because, I've been talking about it for a while. I've been giving you some good background, some foundation to help you, but now we're going to talk about actually getting on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, all that fun stuff. So they actually have a tab here for Spotify, so they make it easier for you. It's good to come out with a few episodes before you do Spotify, though. It's just a little harder to get into there, but it's not too difficult. So this is the link you need. So earlier we copied this link. So this is just like my website hosted by Libsyn. So they give you this too. It's not just put your podcast on these different places. They also give you a website. Granted, I'd rather have my own website like marcguberti.com than relying on this, but it is something good to have. So what you want to do, this is the link you need, RS. Just put RSS at the end. And what you are going to get, we're just going to hit cancel here. You're going to get this. That's okay, because we're not going for stuff to pop up on this page. that's just the link you need. So if you have your whole website thing here and you put /RSS, like they even give you the link right here, but I just wanted to demonstrate that for you just so you knew how to do it. So like if you're not logged into Libsyn, you don't have to go into your destinations and edit view existing and then get this link. You just know the name of your show, Profitable Public Speaking.libsyn.com, and then /RSS. So we are going to copy that. That is the link we need. And now we're going to get into the part where we, like Spotify's right here. So we're just going to get into the part with iTunes and Stitcher. All right, everyone, thanks to the power of editing, we are in the iTunes Connect dashboard. Instead of you having to see me go in and log in and all that, we are here. And this is how you get your podcast on iTunes, which is a very important place to get your podcast on, obviously. And we'll also be showing you Stitcher. In between clips, I also found something good for Spotify, which anyone can use. So that option for Libsyn, which allows you to put content up on Spotify, will also throw in just some tutorial on the other way to get on Spotify, their application, in case you don't want to use the breakthrough code or go on Libsyn or anything like that. So as you can see, the link here is podcastconnect.apple.com. So there it is. That's the link you use. You log in, you hit this big plus to create a show. And now this is where that RSS is important. So you just slap RSS at the end or take that link. You hit validate, and then it'll say if you're ready to submit or not. I'll actually try now. I'm pretty sure though that they'll just say something. They may say so like your podcast is already on iTunes, so something else may come up. But if they like it, you can just hit submit right away. They may offer some guidelines. Like for me, one of the things they said was you have to have the picture at a different size. So that 1400 by 1400, I had to change the picture size. That's really easy. Just go, like, I know from my end, I just go into the preview mode of the picture, which I download onto my desktop. I go into preview and I'm able to change the size. People have different ways of doing that. Now this validating, it is taking a while. Part of this is because this podcast is actually already up. But when this comes up for you, you will see that option. You will see the ability to submit very easily on this same page. So that's pretty much how you get your podcast on iTunes. Now, one of the things people may be realizing is that, well, this is on, iTunes Connect. We have my name here. Do I need an Apple ID? And people who, they're on Apple, you're set because you have an Apple ID. But if you do not have an Apple ID and you do not have an Apple device, what we do is you just head over to this website here, appleid.apple.com. So they'll have this here, which is good for people who are signing back in. But all the way down at the bottom, we have create your Apple ID. So if you hit that, you go through all this, you create your Apple ID, and then you go back to iTunes Connect and you put your podcast in. So we are going to just go back, and that's just some fun stuff you can do later. So when your podcast is submitting for review, it'll say like submitted for review or something like that with a yellow circle, and then you'll see act. So these are the 3 podcasts I have. I honestly do a lot more on Breakthrough Success and Profitable Public Speaking than I do on Breakthrough Business Mentor. This is a podcast that I may go back to pretty soon, but right now I just want to focus on these 2 because I like the interview format better, while this is more of a solo show, and I do a lot of that on YouTube anyway. So in the future, you may see me take YouTube videos, turn them into audio format, and just put them into that podcast, something that I'm thinking of. So this is exactly how you get your podcast on iTunes. And thanks to the power of editing, we are right into Stitcher without you having to see me type in username, password, actually figure out where I was even going, because Stitcher is not as easy of a setup as iTunes. Like, it's a little harder to find what you're looking for with these links, just in my personal opinion. So what you want to go to is content providers. This is exactly where you want to be. The link to that is stitcher.com/content-providers. This is the place where you need to go. So you can apply, like, there's a whole thing for that. But since I went through this application process, it's really not that bad. So if you want to submit a show, this is what you use. So you type in your show name, in this case, Profitable Public Speaking. We'll put this in, just to show you what you would have to do, but I've already done this part. So RSS feed, you know what, we're not going to paste that actually. It's part of the magic of editing. If I paste that, it's my password, so we're not doing that. So profitablepublicspeaking.com/RSS. That is, again, like, it's really easy if you just put the RSS at the end, you know that trick. So you don't have to go back to Libsyn, go back to your destinations tab, and then get this link when you just know it's there. Then you pick your categories, business. I think I picked career. Yeah, so you have a few different categories to choose from. We will just scroll really slowly just to show some of the main categories that are currently here. Current number of listeners. This is just like what they, like the current number of listeners, I think that's just for them. And then you put your Facebook page here, so it's easier for listeners to come across your show. Keywords. This is important. You put your keywords in, people find your show. And that's why when we went to Libsyn earlier, and I said iTunes doesn't look at these keywords as much anymore if you put them in this box, but people like Stitcher and Spotify will look at that. So then once you do all that, you hit I agree, you hit continue. So we'll just put test here just to see. We'll hit continue. All right, so pretty much what happened is you just have to edit the info. I believe what they like to see is this. A lot of websites, like, they really like to see this because for some reason, and it's not just for Stitcher, it's for like a lot of websites in general, like this is not a valid URL for a lot of people, a lot of sites, but that makes it valid. So just one thing to note, you also put in your Facebook page. Now I'm not gonna go through and hit continue because on that tab we just saw, it then says submit, and then you submit. So it's really that easy to get your podcast on Stitcher. Now I'll also talk a little bit about Spotify and use the power of editing to get you there right now instead of you having to see me fumble around to get to where we all have to go. So just like that, we are where we need to be, podcasters.spotify.com. Here you'll have the ability to log in, do all that fun stuff just on this page. And you can log in through Facebook. Like, one thing I really like, you just hit that button with Facebook, you log in, it connects with Facebook. It saves a lot of time. So going into the dashboard, just to give you an idea of how I got that. This is the page you start out with. And then you just hit get started. You put your name, you accept, and then we roll forward. So again, like that, again, they had the HTTPS, so it's good to put that in first. And then you put in the link to your show. So they will start thinking, and then they will come up with that. See, that's just artwork for my show, Profitable Public Speaking with Marc Guberti. They give you these different categories. So they get a lot of this stuff. I believe they pulled this from Apple iTunes. So that makes it a little easier. Then you just tell them a little more information, your country, primary language, that's pretty important. Hosting provider, Libsyn. Primary category, we have education, and choose up to 3 subcategories. So they give you a lot of different choices of how to grow your show. and you just get a lot of different options to choose from. So rather than go too deep into this, we're just going to hit next. They will ask you to check, and then you hit submit. And that's pretty much it. So then it takes a few hours for your podcast to show up on Spotify. One important thing, because I know early in the video I said that you go to that option on Libsyn, and they got you covered with that content. My memory of this was them doing that for Breakthrough Success. I don't remember going through this last time, but I know this is an option available for everyone, including Libsyn users, because I did check to see if this show is on Spotify yet. So I guess it's just like the others where you have to manually go on podcasters.spotify.com. Either way, you do get your podcast on Spotify. Something really cool that Spotify did recently open up. I believe it was last year when Spotify first made this option available, because you see these big companies like Spotify and Apple investing very heavily into podcasting, and because it's just something that's going to keep growing over time. So if you are not in podcasting yet, I strongly recommend you launch your show and get started. We just covered how to get your podcast on iTunes. Even if you don't have an Apple device, you just create the Apple ID as we showed earlier, on Stitcher and on Spotify. Now we're going to talk a little bit about promoting your show. As much as we love all this confetti and the fact that profitable public speaking is going to be on Spotify in a few hours, we're going to cut to the part where we talk about promoting our podcasts. All right, so now we've talked about launching our podcast on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher. We've covered all three of those. How do we then promote it? Because it's one thing to have them on all those platforms, and it definitely makes it easier to get more listeners, but you need to bring up the initial momentum. Now, if you interview people, this is a lot easier. You reach out to people when your episode is live. Hey, what's up? Episode's live. Here's the link. You want to share it. And you give them some copy so they can more easily share your content. And when you share content with your friends, which you should be doing, your social media audience, tag the person who was the guest on your episode, because then they're going to see that tag. And some people who, like me, honestly, I honestly don't share all of the podcasts I've been on. But if the person tags me on Twitter, I will retweet that. So there are some influencers who, if you have them on your show, they will now share it because that's a lot of extra steps. Now, I know people are thinking you just got to go into Twitter and like click the tweet button. It's not that hard. But that is something that takes like 5 to 10 minutes. We all get super busy. You're getting that request in your inbox, which is also super busy. So if you tag the influencer on the social media handles when you share it, you're more likely to get those shares. One power move you can do, because we're all guilty of forgetting things. Actually, two. One, set a reminder on your smartphone when someone's episode goes live to reach out to them. But two, the one I prefer. There are certain apps. I'm pretty sure you can do this in Gmail. I'm actually almost certain. And there's this app called Spark for Mac users, which allows you to schedule emails in advance. So instead of me, like we talked about publishing and scheduling, you're not going to be there Monday at 9 a.m. hitting publish every single Monday for your show. That's something I cannot do for Breakthrough Success, but I schedule so it gets out there. With those apps I mentioned, you can schedule emails in advance. So one thing I do is on the weekend, when there's not as much work for me to do, I'll just bulk write and schedule a bunch of emails so I have them covered for a month in advance. Because especially in my case, because I do 5 episodes a week across my podcast, if you forget to have those emails scheduled and then you forget a week of people, that's 5 people. And then it's just harder to play catch up, and you get a little discouraged to play all that catch up, and then also discouraged to reach out to future people because you're worried about playing that catch up. So it's good to just pick one day where you just schedule the whole month of emails. And it's not really that hard. You just have a rubric. You say, hello, so-and-so. I do something like, your episode is now live. We published it. You could view it at this link. It was such a pleasure to have you on the show. Warm regards to me. P.S. If you enjoyed your experience on the show, I'd greatly appreciate a review. That's a super basic rubric you can use. You can make it a little deeper. Some people personalize like a paragraph or two, to make it more personal. That's a really great thing to do. Marketing, make your content more personalized to the person you're sending it to. But that's the way you promote your episode to people who you had on your show, because that's really important to do. You interview people, it's very easy to leverage. Now, there are some people who they are really adamant about doing the solo show, which you could still create great content. It's just a little harder to grow it. You don't have extra people helping you. In that case, I would say promote with your friends, do all that fun stuff. The rest of the stuff, it applies a lot more to, it applies to both people, but it's more needed for people to solo show because you don't have the luxury of guest promoting for you. So one thing you could do is create a Facebook group around your show. Get your listeners involved, get listeners of your show talking with other listeners of your show. That is a really big play because then you will bring that sense of community together, and you get the idea of it's better to get 100 downloads each day of a really targeted tribe than it is to get 10,000 downloads per day of a untargeted tribe that doesn't care as much and doesn't engage as much as that 100 people. So a Facebook group is pretty important. Promoting on social media is pretty important. Repurposing your content. That's why we talked about Repurposed IO recently, which will be in the show notes. $12 a month, all of your podcast episodes automatically into YouTube videos. You can also record videos, the interview using something like Zoom. You can use Skype too. Skype also does videos. Zoom for me just gives better video quality, so that choice is up to you. Speaking of video, if you interview guests, let them know it's video. This is actually a tip I got from Melanie Benson of Amplify Your Success podcast. We met at New Media Summit. Again, part of a podcast. The only reason I got into New Media Summit was because I had a podcast. A lot of opportunities happen for you. Going back to Melanie, she recommended that because as a guy, I don't think as much about how I look. There are people who, if you don't tell them it's video and then all of a sudden, bam, it's video, it's gonna be like, I gotta get my makeup on, I gotta look good, and if you're a guy watching this, like, you may not fully understand that, but if you interview people, you have to tell them it's video. To shout out to Melanie once again for that, because ever since she told me, it's like, when you buy a car and you see all cars on the road of like that same brand, that's the kind of effect I got, because now it's like, whenever like I hear about someone who's like, oh, like, why didn't I know it was video or something like that, I immediately think of Melanie each time. So just a good thought there. Another on logistics of interviewing people really quick. I forgot to mention this earlier, which is why I'm bringing it up here. We'll talk a little bit more about promotion soon. But instead of going back and forth on picking a date, get some kind of calendar app like Acuity, which will be down in the show notes as well. Acuity is what I use to schedule interviews with everyone. I actually use one of their mid-tier plans just because I need more calendars for each podcast and virtual summits that I do. But again, really affordable. Like $10 a month is like the most expensive. Like, you could very easily host a really successful podcast and never pay more than $100 a month for it. That's just, it's not that expensive at all to host a podcast to get the results that you want. It is a little more expensive per month if you interview people, but you get a lot more out of it because you can promote like affiliate products. You can interview the person who created the product. You can learn a lot. You can get public speaking gigs by interviewing people. There's so much that happens if you interview people. That's why I've been recommending it so much. Just a little thing I want to drop in there because logistics of an interview are really important, and I did not feel like this video would be complete if we did not talk a little bit about that. So going into promotion, again, we have those three main places that we just put our podcast. We're telling all of our friends about it. When you interview people, it's definitely a bigger play. Now, one other thing you could do is, as you can see, I have a few books behind me. And while these books make money, while I do promote them on the show, it's a two-way street in the sense where there are some people who they're going to go on my podcast, hear about the book the first time, and then buy it. By the way, you want an easy to remember link because some people are going to be on the road listening. So whether it's text this number or just something like marcguberti.com/book or something like buy podcast domination, just go to Amazon, get your copy, something like that, easy for people to remember. While that's going to be how some people buy your books, Other people are going to buy them through like Amazon search engine. And then in each book, I mention my podcast. So if you have a book or if you have a training course or if you're working on one, mention your podcast. Incorporate some of your podcast episodes into the book, whether you just mention them or you have a quote or something like that. On my Instagram, I'm constantly putting up quotes from episodes. My approach is to give people the value right away and then say, hey, if you want to see listen to the rest of the episode, go to these places. If you want to watch it, head over to YouTube. So you want to give people a lot of different options, and you don't want to just stick to exclusively one platform, because there are people who like to go on Instagram and that's how they consume. There are other people who like to go on Twitter. With that said, while you don't want to stick with one platform, you want to focus most of your time on one platform. Because when you master a platform, it becomes easier for you to master every other platform around you. So I know we're talking a lot about social media because that's how a lot of podcasters promote themselves. Instagram stories also a pretty powerful technique. So I know we're talking a lot about social media. There's a lot more potential if you do interview, because you have the guests, you reach out to them, but then you can ask the guest at the end, do you know of 3 other people who would be a great fit for your show? So that's 3 other people who could discover who you are. And that's 3 other people who can then promote the show. And if you take on guests, you can also do a roundup episode where you interview 10 people in the same episode for like 2 minutes each, or they just come on and give like one tip. And that's 10 people who will promote that episode. So it's definitely easy if you do collaborations, if you also do interviews that set up for a future collaboration, whether you want some affiliate partner, you want to get on a certain stage and then mention your podcast to that audience. I know I've been talking about this a lot, but interviews really make the podcasting work. It's really what allows you to get all these different opportunities. So I know we've been talking a lot about launching our podcasts on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher. We talked a little bit about promoting our podcast. If you want to learn more about that, I actually put together a really awesome evergreen event for you, Profitable Podcasting Summit. A lot of the top players, actually 20 of them, all came together to share their best stuff on how do we get more visibility for our podcast? How do we monetize our podcast? That is the one thing that we didn't cover as much in this video because it's pretty long already. And we're just talking about like a starting point. Like, this is the foundational piece, but Profitable Podcasting Summit, that's what's going to really catapult you to being able to turn podcasting into the business it could truly become, especially with podcasting still being a relatively small area. I believe there are just like 600,000 podcasts right now at time of recording, while there are probably like 1 million blogs, even more than that, getting created every single day. So podcasting is truly in a space of its own, truly undertapped relative to some of the other options. So profitablepodcastingsummit.com, that will be in the description as well. And don't forget, we've been talking about this for a while, about how you can use the coupon code BREAKTHROUGH to get this month and the following month free on Libsyn. And I bring that up a lot because a lot of people bring up expenses, like podcasting. Like, we've already covered a lot of myths that, podcasting, it's not a lot of money. Like the covers are just like, $5 for artwork. You'd have to like try really hard to make podcasting more than $100 a month, unless you hire people, which then of course it's gonna be more than $100 a month if you hire for show notes and editing. I used to do that. Now I do that stuff by myself because really quickly here, I have a rubric that I use. I'm trying to find one that is blank. I will just have to reach for it. This rubric that I use. And by using this rubric, by writing down some of the key stuff like links, lessons, all that, I can easily do my show notes on my own instead of paying, I think it was $300 a month, maybe more than that I was paying. So like this one sheet alone is worth the time on this video because it saves a lot of money with show notes. With the editing, I'm super basic with that. I just cut out the beginning part where it's just like, welcome, and it's a breakthrough success. I cut out the beginning part where I'm just like standing there, like waiting to get ready. And then I cut out the end where, like the person's like, thank you for having me as a show. And I got to drag the mouse to like click stop recording. I cut that part out too. But other than that, I keep all that stuff. There is like a time where we have to like cut. I just stop the recording and then I resume so I could see the exact time where it stopped and I had to resume it. You could do that with Zoom. I haven't done that with Skype because that just automatically records. I had it set up that way. Zoom is what I currently use, and it's really easy. Just stop the recording. Pause the recording, resume the recording, and then just like that, you see where you have to go to make the changes. So I definitely hope this video was very helpful for you with launching and growing your podcast using Libsyn, hopefully, because I definitely love that company. I feel like it's one of the top players in the space. Don't forget to get your free ticket to Profitable Podcasting Summit. It's all virtual, so there's no travel required. But anyway, once again, I really hope you enjoyed this video. You sticking around to the end at this point of this really long video that probably took me almost 3 hours to produce. Really awesome. Thank you so much for sticking with me. And also don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you want more videos just like this. So signing off, what I want you guys to do is dream big, achieve greatness, and unlock your potential today.